लेडीज़ एंड जेंटलमैन, हुकूमत जो है उसमें कानून की जो हैसियत है और इस सोसाइटी में जो हैसियत है उसके बारे में आपको ये बताता चलूँ कि पिछले दिनों काबुल से एक डेलीगेशन आया था, तो उसमें लिखा हुआ था कि देयर इज़ वन मिनिस्टर ऑफ लॉ, वन मिनिस्टर ऑफ रेलवेज़ एंड देयर आर अदर मिनिस्टर्स। तो पाकिस्तान हुकूमत ने ये कहा कि आपके यहाँ रेलवे तो है नहीं, ये तो अभी अभी सुना है कुछ बन रहा है, तो रेलवे के मिनिस्टर आपका क्या कर रहा है यहाँ पे? तो उन्होंने कहा आपकी तरफ से, इस्लामाबाद की तरफ से 25 साल से जो डेलीगेशन आ रहे हैं उनमें आपका मिनिस्टर ऑफ लॉ आता है, हमने कभी एतराज़ नहीं किया। लॉ इज़ इवेसिव, लॉ इज़ इनविजिबल, लॉ इज़ बिकमिंग इनविजिबल, law is becoming irrelevant as far as the solution of the conflict is concerned, which means what? Which means that there are legal instruments used for solution of political influence. Political conflicts are not to be resolved through the legal instrument. This has happened in this month. On 19th June, law was instrumentalized to settle scores with the political elite. This is one interpretation which needs to be looked at. The issue is again that there was a kind of a conflict between judiciary and the executive that was transformed into the clash of institutions when the Speaker's ruling was overruled. Parliament was overruled. Judiciary took on the sovereign institution of this country. No other institution is professedly, constitutionally sovereign. So, the difference between the self-professed sovereignty, informal sovereignty, and the well-protected and legalized sovereignty, that is there. There is, therefore, the difference here that there is a parliament that has been overruled. Now, where is the difference? There are obviously institutions such as the state institutions, which includes 3 institutions: unelected institutions, merit-based institutions, army, bureaucracy, and the judiciary. They are unelected. Therefore, they are accountable to those people and those institutions which are elected. On top is the elected institution. And this is what democracy is. If there is an institution which is unaccountable to any other institution, that would mean that that institution is sovereign, for which there is no space in the Constitution, because that is then unconstitutional. So, what has happened? Here is Parliament, which is the microcosm of the nation, and that Parliament is unfortunately, unlike the army, unlike the bureaucracy, and unlike the judiciary, it's a fractured institution. This is the difference. That is why it's more amenable to encroachment from those institutions which are not fractured. Here is a fractured institution. There is a parliamentary schism, intra-parliamentary divide. That is there, and therefore the consensus on the rules, the consensus on the means and the ends has been eroding. There is an erosion of the understanding between, for example, the 2 major parties and their allies. The PPP on the one hand leading one coalition, and the PMLN on the other. What has happened? These wings or segments of the Parliament have been the instrument of shift from Parliament to extra parliamentary rule. This is what happened in the 1990s, inviting the military in the 1980s, inviting others, extra parliamentary forces, and there are two, army and judiciary, because the third one, bureaucracy, has been controlled, contained, constrained, made to serve the political masters. Now there are two, army, which comes in violating the constitution. Far better than that, there would be judiciary, which comes with the constitution, interpreting the constitution in a way which does not tally with the interpretation of those inside the inside the Parliament, at least the majority. So what has happened? The Parliament, because it is divided, one part of the Parliament technically invites others, involves others, engages others, the extra parliamentary forces, to come in, if not, and hopefully not, by violating the constitution, then bringing in the sanctity and the power and the legitimacy of the constitution and do the trick. This is one understanding of the issue, and here I would say that the politicians are given to brinkmanship. They play to the maximum. They continue to hope, no, we can get to this point and still the system will survive. Okay, it has survived, let's take an extra step, still it will survive. And they'll go an extra mile and still they'll try to do whatever and try their luck. Unfortunately, they have been out of luck in this country for 2 to 3 to 4 times. So what's there? This reliance on extra parliamentary forces by those sitting in the Parliament. This is one aspect of the constitutional debate which is going on, revolving the clash of institutions. Now from Parliament, let's go to the judiciary. The judiciary has been controversial for the last 3 years in terms of allegations about the encroachment on the domain of legislation. There is, for example, this encroachment through case law, because each time there is a verdict, it adds up a weight to a particular kind of legal and constitutional thinking. That has been happening. So here we've got the legislature, which is supposed to be making law, and there is an informal process of making law outside in the court. And this is the trouble faced by the legislatures throughout the world, by the way. It's not only Pakistan, but the legislatures have been able to contain the role of the judiciary. In Pakistan and to some extent in India, it has not been the case. Now, what has been happening to the judiciary? First, they got the veto over appointment of judges. Virtual, first, 1996, Al-Jihad Trust. Now, actual, after the 19th Amendment failed to activate the parliamentary committee, and thereby this is like the military being state unto itself. Here, this is judiciary unto itself, because nobody would appoint judiciary, we will appoint ourselves. That is, for example, the Prime Minister or the parliamentarians. Who appoints them? Who sends them there? Public. the masses, the voters. Parliament doesn't appoint itself. There is a way, and here there is no way. One is veto over appointment. The second is that this particular agency, the institution, is not accountable to any other institution or agency of the government. This is an amazing situation which has emerged. And of course, thirdly, in an operational sense, we shall talk, for example, about the creeping arbitrariness. Look at NRO. Yes, this is to be judicialized. 2009, if you remember. 2010 and 2011, no NRO, sleeping over NRO. 2012, reactivated NRO case. What has happened? Why is it that the 2009 was not finished in 2009? Because the law remains the same as interpreted by the judiciary. But what has changed? Why there is this creeping arbitrariness? Because there is a context. There is a context outside the judiciary, and that context is that there is an ascent to the precipice. Civil-military relations sank deep in and around the Memo Gate. The government almost looked like going. There was a classical scenario where whenever there was a crisis between the civil and military wings of the state, who was the loser? Always the civilian. That had been the case. So it looked as if there is the government and it's on the go. That was the ideal time to take up that dormant case relating to NRO. For 2 long years, it was there, non-activated. There was a retreat from the precipice after some kind of understanding between the civil and military wings of the state in terms of the Memo Gate, but there hasn't been a retreat from the precipice as far as the executive and the judiciary conflict is concerned. So there is a kind of a discordant voice here. So the judiciary, here I would say the parliament and the judiciary have been operating. The judiciary has been operating in some ways which are not traditional, typical, generally acceptable. For example, about the PM, Gilani, there was the double jeopardy. Here is a person who has been sentenced, not simply given a verdict and that's it. Sentenced, that sentence was carried out. Sentence, by the way, was carried out for a few seconds. The matter. Here, there is, for example, a conviction and then there is a punishment for 1 year or 2 years. The man is out after 2 years or 2 seconds. And then you bring that person back, that case back, reopen that case, convict the same person, disqualify the same person in the same case 3 months later. There is something to probe here. First, conviction, sentence, 2 months there is a kind of a relapse, and then in the same case, disqualification. This is some kind of a legal anomaly which needs to be addressed. And I would say here that the disqualification procedure was short-circuited. Why not follow what's written there in the Constitution? From here, then it will go to the Chief Election Commissioner. There is a procedure. Let's start following the procedure. Why not? Why be original about it? There are enough people in the country who have been original innovative, out of the norm, and they have not been helpful in sustaining democracy in Pakistan. Now there have been multiple trials. One trial, the court trial. Second trial, the media trial, and we all know about it. Media has almost single-handedly, during the last 5 years, destroyed the political class. This is the net result, let's say, of the media. Politicians corrupt, inefficient, liars and liars. You have been hearing for 5 long years. And the way they are exposed to the talk shows, we all know that. Now, it has been very selective. The formal political actors have been exposed. The weaker ones have been exposed. The MNAs and MPAs have been exposed. The informal political actors, the powerful ones playing from behind the scene, have not been exposed. That includes 2 institutions, the army and the judiciary. They have been sacrosanct, not to be touched. And obviously there are legal provisions and moral provisions for that. And there is no moral, legal, or any other kind of protection for politicians. The media trial, and now the bar trial. Bar the bar for certain lawyers. Bar the law. Bar the route to justice. Bar the rule to even the legal process. Bar it. What kind of civilized behavior we have come to, where in the world, the murderers, the rapists, the arsonists, everybody in the world is supposed to have a lawyer. This is a strange country where you bar the bar to this man or this lady or to the other person or whosoever he or she happens to be. This kind of activism, street activity, is not up to the highest standard. Finally, I would come to the conflict of institutions per se. As I mentioned, the unelected institutions are arraigned against the elected institutions. That is the nature of the conflict in Pakistan for the last 65 years. This comes to a high level, goes down at some other level, other points in history, comes up again. This is the dilemma of Pakistan's history. And here, as I said, the wrong means to probably the right end. The legal means to a political solution, which means what? A prime minister enjoying a majority on the floor of the parliament is thrown out by law. This is, if it is democracy, I don't know, but this is outside the purview of the political framework of the state, and we must preserve that if we want to preserve democracy. And protocol is changing. There are, for example, 19,000 governments in the United States. That's the typical way of saying that every school, every hospital, every kind of institution is ruled by an elected institution in the United States, not by appointed henchmen of this power or that party. Meaning thereby, and I've been attending, for example, the sessions in the Congress in Washington, where the elected ones will sit higher than the Secretary of State, Clinton. She would sit there and she would address and she would reply to the questions, because she will not be questioning. The elected ones will question, and she is there only to answer. This is what democracy is understood by. And therefore, there is a protocol change here in Pakistan. Protocol is changing. And the state apparatuses are not operating on their own. These two institutions, army, bureaucracy, and judiciary, they are not unto themselves. There is a mass support. So here there is a line-up between the state apparatuses. More than that, there is an urban middle-class constituency for this particular kind of clash and support for judiciary. Because here in this country, urban middle class has been apolitical, has not been voting. I have not seen the big mob coming in cars, getting down, standing in the queue for voting purposes. You don't see the middle class out there. They come there, probably half of them, or those who are particularly the upper middle class. That's not the voting public. Let's say that is the public, which is the support base of the judiciary, and. Of course, there are Trojan horses always there within the parliament who are there to oblige non-parliamentary forces. And I would say finally, is there a ganging up going on here? What's going on? Is there again a precipice where you throw one case, then the other, the immunity case and the two office case, and there are all kinds of cases? I do not have any briefing for any party here. We are talking here about an institution which is being shredded away. Try not to shred away the institution. Try to preserve the parliament, because it's the parliament which is the guardian of the sovereignty of the citizens. Otherwise, you and I will again go to that kind of understanding which was there after the two parties surrendered initiative to Ziaul Haq, if you remember, PPP and PNA, and within 4 years they formed the two adversaries, MRD against the military dictator. Then here was Nawaz Sharif and here was Benazir Bhutto, and they were, whatever they were doing in 1990s, come Musharraf, the same adversaries met in London and developed Charter of Democracy. I hope we are again not going through a decade of some other kind of rule, and again there would be a London-based Charter of Democracy. Let's try to avoid all this kind of drama, and let's try to keep democracy intact. Thank you very much.